Yo, just want to make a quick video for you guys on how to go from a truck intake on a Gen 3 LS based engine to a car intake on that same Gen 3 LS based engine. So it's what I did here. No, it's not what I did there. That's an LS1 already. So that already has most of the stuff needed. But this is a Gen 3 4.8 engine. Originally, I had that truck engine or that truck intake on it, and I switched to an LS1 intake just for uh, lower profile, and obviously it looks a little bit better. So let me show you what you got to do to go from that to that. First, we'll start with throttle body. So your throttle body obviously is going to sit a lot lower to the water pump than the truck intake does. If you guys are running the truck water pump, the outlet comes out right about this area. You have to kind of notch that pump or that outlet to clear the throttle body, but that will work. You can do that. Or you can switch to an LS3 water pump, and that has the correct spacing to the truck crank pulley as the truck water pump, and then that gives you the water outlet down here rather than up here. And another one will be, so your TPS sensor, or not your TPS, that's throttle body sensor, your map sensor goes back here on the truck intake, and notice it has these two tabs. Those two tabs hold in that sensor, as compared on you can't see it on that one. Compared to an LS1 or an LS car intake for a truck engine, it only has one tab. So there's actually two different map sensors. You got the car intake map sensor, and you have the truck intake map sensor. You would think, oh, I could just shave down the map sensor, one of the sides of the map sensor for the truck, because it'll have two tabs on each side, and you would think, oh, I just shave down one side and just have one tab and put it on there. It doesn't work. I've tried it. You have to get the car map sensor for the car intake. So I already went that route for you. They're actually not too expensive, but you do have to have that. Some of these intakes, so this is an LS1 intake, so it had EGR. You have to get the same EGR block off that you would typically get for the truck intake, which would go right here if you have a truck intake with EGR. Let's see. So this is the truck throttle body off of this intake. It's basically, so you can look at it. And then this is an actual LS1 engine with the LS6 intake, and it's the same exact 3-bolt throttle body. So your tube running to the side of the throttle body is the same exact ordeal, but one big difference is your I just went blank on it. This bad boy's right here. Sorry, I accidentally clicked stop with my thumb. But anyways, your PCV setup is completely different on a truck engine compared to a car engine. So this LS1, the PCV setup, goes in the same valve cover, but it crosses over to the back, and then it runs to two different outlets on the passenger side valve cover. I think I said driver side valve cover, or I said passenger side, driver side valve cover, as to where the truck, it just goes directly into the driver side valve cover and comes to the top of the intake. So what I did, I searched for quite a while all over the internet on how to run a PCV for a car intake on a truck engine, because obviously this valve cover doesn't have two outlets, it just has that single. And the best thing I could find was people running a catch can, which switches it up a little bit to somewhat be identical to that. I had no interest in running a catch can, so all I did was I plugged off that port right there on the intake, and then I just ran the PCV from the valve cover to this port of the intake. Now this is a stock engine. It's nothing crazy, so I'm honestly not worried about the whole PCV setup. I even, before I did that, I just put a breather on the back of that, where the PCV end is on the valve cover, and I just capped that right there, and I didn't have that at all, and I didn't see any difference. I mean, it really just depends on your engine setup if you really need that. Now, yes, that's metered air and blah blah blah, and you can get all scientific, but if you're just like, I'm just going to cap those 2 ports on each side and put a breather back there, I promise it'll be perfectly fine. If somebody tells you it won't, they're getting too into it, and that's just not what I needed for this engine. So I did that just to see if there was a difference, and I haven't cared to take it off because it hasn't hurt anything putting it on. But I did have a breather at one point. So PCV setup is quite a bit different. Another thing is your fuel line or your fuel rail. So obviously on the truck intake, your fuel rail goes directly back that way. On the car intake, it's off to the side like this. So if you're running truck coils, you have to bend this fuel rail. You have to bend it up and out rather than how it is just straight, because it interferes with this coil pack. So I just basically just pried it just little by little until I had it moved out of the way just enough to clear the coil pack. As where you can see on this actual LS1, it's straight out, but these coil packs are much flatter. I believe these valve covers are a little different, but I could be wrong. I haven't paid too much attention to that. And then of course your injector plugs will be different on a car than on a truck. You'll just have to Google which injector adapters you need to go from a truck to a car, because off the top of my head I can't think about it. These swap harnesses, these cheap eBay and Amazon swap harnesses, they come with the correct injector plugs for these car intakes, except for an LS2, I believe. Just LS1 and LS6 injectors. You actually have to get injector adapters to go from these plugs to the truck injectors. So that's a good thing. And then obviously that's a single feed fuel rail. This is this is in and return. So if you're not running a Corvette filter regulator that has a return hooked up to it, but you have this return running all the way to the tank, but you go into a rail that doesn't have a return, you most likely will have to put a Corvette filter regulator on it so that you can run the return from the regulator to the tank if your tank isn't returnless. I know that's kind of confusing, but that's just my assumption. My fuel pump in this is returnless, so it didn't matter for me. But I want to say that's really it. Your vacuum booster is a little bit different. So on the truck, you got this back here, and you can pull that out and put something else in. That's where the car intake, it's a part of the actual intake, so you'll just take it off of there and put it back there. There's nothing different about that. But aside from that, you can't use the truck intake bolts on the car intake. I assume you have the common sense to know that, but I'm just letting you know. My biggest thing is I got some Amazon intake bolts for this, and they had a hex head or an Allen wrench head, and I would not get those. I would get the factory bolts, because those Allen wrench headed bolts that I got from Amazon, they stripped as soon as I started getting tight, so don't use those. Aside from that, that's about it. It seems like a lot, but it's not too much. Your throttle cable position is different too, so you'll have to readjust your throttle cable length because you're going from sitting this high to sitting that low, so you're gonna have to adjust that. Your air intake is gonna definitely be different because, like I've said, the intake sits much lower, so you're gonna have to mess with that. But other than that, that's it. There's not a whole lot to it. Apologize if I made it slightly confusing, but I did my best to hopefully make somebody new to this understand. Appreciate you watching. I hope it helps. If you follow me, I appreciate it. If you don't, I still appreciate you watching the video. I'm LS swapping a 78 Scout next, so if you guys want to check that out, just subscribe. You can follow me down in the description for my Facebook and Instagram and whatnot. But I appreciate y'all. I hope this helps. See y'all next time.